Buenos dias. That's half my Spanish. The other half is vino tinto. The outline of my talk. First, I should be talking a few words about sustainability, then the arguments against incineration, then the solution, the zero waste solution, and finally, a few words about consumerism, or moving to post-consumerism. Sustainability. We would need 4 planets if everybody consumed like an American. We would need 2 planets if everybody consumed like a European, and meanwhile, India and China are copying our consumption patterns. Something clearly has to change, and the best place to start that change, in my view, is waste, because we all make waste. And all the time we're making waste, we're part of a non-sustainable way of living on this planet. But with good political leadership, we can all be part of this first step towards sustainability. We have to convert our linear society to a circular society. Nature functions in circles. We function in straight lines. So this linear society begins with the extraction of raw materials, manufacture of objects, consumption of those objects, and then, after a very short time, waste. Now, I'd like to look at the impacts, the local and global impacts of this linear system. We use an enormous amount of energy to extract materials, transport, energy to manufacture, and in the process we produce solid waste. In fact, we produce 70 times more waste here than we see over here. And we also produce air pollution, water pollution, and of course carbon dioxide, and all that carbon dioxide is contributing to global warming. So how do the different ways of handling waste that we're familiar with, how do they impact this picture? And we'll start with landfill. Discard landfill. If we bury stuff in a hole in the ground, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. So there's no mitigation. It's business as usual. What about, landfills are not sustainable, clearly. What about incineration? The same thing. If you burn something, then you've got to start all over again, all these impacts unmitigated. So incineration or gasification is not sustainable. But if we recycle materials, we cut out the impacts of extraction here. When we recycle materials back to industry, then we don't have to extract them from raw materials. So that is a reduction. That does mitigate. If we reuse and repair items, then we cut out the impacts of both extraction and fabrication. So when we reuse objects going straight back to the consumer, then we cut out the impacts of extraction and manufacture. Now, composting. Composting reduces the use of chemical fertilizers and topsoil. So that too reduces extraction and manufacture impacts. But composting does more than that. Composting puts nutrients back into the soil, treats the soil as an ecosystem, not just sand that you put chemicals on, but an ecosystem. And it also retains water, which is very important in hot climates, and it also retains carbon. So here, when you look at compost, you see bits of wood. In an incinerator, that's immediately carbon dioxide. But in compost, it may be several months, several years before this degrades to carbon dioxide. So part 2 then, I will now talk about some more arguments against incineration. The first argument is that incineration is not sustainable, but there are other arguments. Number one, incinerators are extremely expensive. And because Argentina does not make incinerators, this means that most of the money that you spend on this complicated capital equipment is going to leave Argentina. And for this enormous amount of money, we get very few jobs created. You take this incinerator in Brescia, Italy, the most beautiful incinerator in the whole world. Actually, this cost 300 million euros to build. Another 500 or 600 million euros in energy subsidies to produce 80 jobs. And I went to a green center here with the Cartoneros, 67 jobs for a teeny-weeny capital investment. So, I'm going to go on from there. In Argentina, if you incinerate these materials, then you are going to jeopardize the jobs of these people that are using these materials. And here's one of the cartoneros in Buenos Aires. We are destroying valuable materials. Look at this. This is from a recycling plant. You'll see plastic, cardboard, paper, more paper. All of this is burnable. All of this can end up in an incinerator. And as we get better at recycling, there's less fuel for the incinerators. And now we have a situation in Europe where Germany is importing waste, Netherlands is importing waste, Sweden is importing waste, Norway is importing waste to feed their incinerators. But these are valuable resources. If you look at the value of these materials in the northwest of the United States, even with the ups and downs of the economy, you'll notice that the baseline value of these materials keeps rising and rising. Now over $100 a ton of those materials. And not only here, these materials are being recovered in one of the green centers run by the Cartoneros here in Buenos Aires. Incineration, this is, as engineers, you'll find this interesting. Incineration, which is billed as waste to energy, is actually a waste of energy. 4 times more energy is saved by recycling and reusing. And let's be clear about this, that the energy saved by recycling. In other words, when you don't go back to extraction and manufacture, you're saving the energy that we've invested in extraction, in transport, in manufacture. All of that is lost when you burn, but can be saved if you recycle and reuse. And so here, this consulting company from Canada calculated for the different materials in the waste stream, which are both recyclable and combustible. This first column is how much energy you save. This column is how much you, with recycling. And this column is how much you get if you burn and produce electricity. And this is the ratio of how much more you get from recycling than from incineration. And you notice this one, PET plastic, which is the plastic of water bottles. 26 times more energy is saved by recycling compared to burning. So it really is an environmental crime to burn these plastics. We should be recycling, reusing them as much as possible. You had a question?
Yeah, how is that energy saved?
It's saved. It's
what
the.
do you mean by saving?
Okay. It's the energy. Okay, when you get a product, a lot of energy has been put into the manufacture of that product. You put in energy to extract resources, energy in transporting it, energy in manufacturing it, energy in transport. Now, if you burn it, all that energy, you cannot recover that. All you're recovering when you incinerate is the calorific value, and even that a small percentage, 25%. Okay, but when you recycle, you're not having to use that energy again. If I say I have to reuse an object, if I reuse that object, that reused object means that I haven't had to extract raw materials, I haven't had to transport, I haven't had to manufacture. That's the energy that we're talking about in saving. I'm glad you asked that question because that's important. Okay, incineration is inflexible. This is a comment from Ludwig Kramer, who was the director of waste management in Europe. He said essentially, if you build these things, you have to feed them. You have to feed them not for 1 year. When you build an incinerator, this is a 25-year financial investment. And the only way you're going to get that financial investment back is to run it. You're going to get money back by selling the electricity, and you're going to get money back from the citizens who pay the tipping fee at the incinerator. And if you don't get that money back, you're going to lose money. So you've got to run it. You've got to run it for 25 years. Now, if I consider the changes that have taken place during my 28 years of involvement, enormous changes in attitudes, government attitudes, citizens' attitudes to recycling, reuse, attitudes towards sustainability, it would be amazing if the next 25 years didn't produce more significant changes. The communities that have built incinerators will not be able to take advantage of those changes. But the communities that haven't built incinerators obviously can. So this is what we mean by being inflexible. For example, I'll give you an example. 28 years ago, I remember distinctly a phone conversation with the director of solid waste in our county in New York State. He said, "Paul, if you talk about more than 15% recycling, you're going to lose all your credibility." And at that time, that was the prevailing attitude, that recycling was good, but it could only have a little impact. Now, as you'll see in a moment, San Francisco is getting 80% recycling. 80%. Things change. Incinerators produce a toxic ash and don't get rid of landfills. For every 4 tons of waste that we burn, we get 1 ton of ash that nobody wants. In this ash, 90% is what we call bottom ash. This is the ash that falls through the grates underneath the furnace, and 10% is fly ash, which is captured in the air pollution control devices. This is toxic. This is very toxic. Very, very toxic. Now, I know in Buenos Aires you have a ban on incineration. And so people are talking about gasification as if that was an alternative. It's not. They're also talking about cogeneration. They're talking about making refuse-derived fuel. Absolutely the worst thing that you could do. The worst thing you could do. And let me explain. If you make refuse-derived fuel and send it to industrial furnaces or cement kilns, you don't have this. More money is spent on a modern incinerator on this part of the operation than the rest put together. Okay? So a lot of money is going here to capture the toxic metals and dioxins and furans. If you make refuse-derived fuel and send it to an industrial burner or a cement kiln, they don't have anything near as sophisticated as that. So all you're doing is to disperse the pollution. Now, as far as what countries are doing with this ash, Germany and Switzerland put the fly ash into nylon bags and into salt bags. In Japan, many of the incinerators vitrify the ash. They make it into a glass to stop the metals from leaching from this ash. And in Denmark, beautiful, clean Denmark, a wonderful solution, Denmark. They send it all to Norway. And in England, they put the fly ash into hazardous waste landfills. Now, here, this is near Gloucester in England. And these people in these houses said, what's this dust going to me? And the government, the British government said, no need to worry. This dust doesn't go beyond the boundary of the facility. And then the citizens, being excellent engineers, scientists, did their own research, and they found that. And that is a 40-mile-an-hour road sign, which is outside the facility. And the government said, oh, yes, you're right, it does actually go outside. Good research. Incineration doesn't get rid of landfills. In America, we allow our incinerators to mix the bottom ash and the fly ash before it's tested. And the end result is it's passing, it's non-toxic, according to the regulations. So this is either going to regular landfills or it's going to special landfills, landfills which only take ash. So here is a very large ash landfill in Massachusetts. This is only ash from incineration. So again, you're not getting rid of landfills. This is important because the way it's done politically is, oh, we've got a crisis, the landfill is filling up, we've got to do something, got to do something, got to do something. Bring in the engineers, build a big machine. Get rid of it. Well, it doesn't get rid of it. You've still got 1/4. Okay. It also puts toxic pollutants, which are sometimes persistent, permanent, into the air. Of course, as far as permanents, these are permanent: lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic. Now remember, the best you can do is to capture these in the air pollution control. But if you do that, then the ash is very toxic. It's a catch-22. The better the incinerator, the more toxic the ash. And new substances are actually made in the burning process: dioxins and furans. Now, I'm not going to talk in detail about that, but I can certainly answer questions. But the important thing today is that these are coming out as nanoparticles. Very, very tiny particles. And here's the problem. Incinerators in Europe and America are regulated, the particulates are regulated at 10 microns. And in some places, this is being reduced to 2.5 microns. But with the particles that we're concerned about are tiny, very, very tiny compared to this. In other words, they're not being measured and they're not being regulated. So you get the incinerator says, oh, we meet all federal regulations. Well, of course you do. But if you don't have any regulations, that's not difficult. Now, we know from studies done in the United States that if you look at different cities and you compare the disease rate and the death rate in those cities, and as a function of particle size, the more particles, the higher the disease and the higher the death rate in those cities, from respiratory problems and heart failure. Now, it's also true that as the size of the particle goes down, those respiratory problems go up. The disease rate and the death rate goes up. So in a city like Buenos Aires, you're already getting this problem. You're already out here, you have people that are losing years from their life, succumbing to respiratory problems and so on. And nanoparticles, incineration, would make that worse. Why? Well, it's very difficult to capture nanoparticles. And yes, we produce nanoparticles in any high temperature combustion. Wood burning, oil burning, coal burning, all produce nanoparticles. The difference with trash incineration is that these are the most toxic nanoparticles. Because every toxic element that we use in commerce could end up in an incinerator. And if they're in that incinerator, then those toxic elements can end up in the nanoparticles. They travel long distances, so they would cover the whole airshed in Buenos Aires. They remain suspended for long periods of time, and they, of course, go deep, deep down into the lungs. But the real problem is there's no defense. There's no biological defense. These particles are so tiny, they just go straight through the membranes. They squeeze in between the proteins, the fat, straight through, into the blood. And of course, once they're in the blood, then they're distributed throughout the body. And here you see a particle. This is brain tissue. Brain tissue. Lead, this particle contains lead, barium, chromium, iron, and silicon. Now, let's be clear about this. There's no question that if you look today, you can find these nanoparticles in tissues, all tissues in your body. What has not been shown yet is that the presence of these particles is leading to any definable disease. So there is more research to be done on what the significance of having a particle like that has on your brain. We don't know yet. Now, as far as incineration is concerned, or any pollution, you need three things to protect the public. You need strong regulations, but you also need adequate monitoring, scientific monitoring, and you need aggressive government enforcement. And if either of these are weak, then these won't protect you. I would remind you that the strongest environmental regulations were in the former Soviet Union. They had really tough regulations. But if you go to the former Soviet Union, you don't find a nice, clean environment. Why? Because they neither monitored nor enforced the regulations. And that's what you have to be concerned about in Argentina. What's the past record of your government of enforcing regulations? How well equipped are your universities to do the monitoring and so on? And that, as I mentioned, is particularly difficult for nanoparticles. Because of the extreme unpopularity of incinerators with the public, they keep changing the name. They don't like using the word incinerator. So they've had waste to energy, energy from waste, thermal valorization, blah, 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 blah. Now we have gasification, pyrolysis, and plasma arc facilities. And all these companies claim that these are not incineration. This is not incineration. But if you look carefully, each of these techniques involves a two-stage process. In the first phase, solid is converted to gas, either by slowly roasting the material itself or an external heat source, plasma arc or whatever, to convert the solid into a gas. And then the second phase is to burn that gas. And at that point, you're dealing with incineration, the same problems as incineration, the nanoparticles, the toxic metals, dioxins, and so on. So a more accurate name for these facilities would be a gasifying incinerator, a pyrolyzing incinerator, a plasma arc incinerator. Now, there's a lot more I can say about gasification and problems. I'm going to leave it to the end, maybe for questions, especially for engineers who are particularly interested in the problems with this technology. I would be happy to do that, but I'm anxious to get on and talk about what I consider to be the real alternatives. Because even if you made incineration safe, even if you captured all the air pollution and you had a way of looking after the ash, I maintain that it's not sensible because it's not sustainable. The modern incinerator is trying to perfect a bad idea. Our task in the 21st century is not to get better and better at destroying finite materials. Our task is to stop making products that have to be destroyed. And that is a very, very important message of zero waste. There, right there. The problem of waste, I'm sorry now, this for the engineers here, I'm awfully sorry. Let me apologize right now, because I don't think that this is a technological problem. I think that waste is a social, political problem. And therefore, it's not going to be solved with magic machines. It's going to be solved with better organization, better education, and better industrial design. And there are going to be places for engineers, but it's going to be much more subtle interventions, only coming up with improvements in technology at very precise moments. For example, right now there's a lot of discussion about whether we should compost, whether we should do anaerobic digestion, whether we should do it locally, whether we should do it centrally. These are the kind of questions where engineers, I think, will have a lot to say. So, the zero waste solution then. The zero waste is a new direction. We're moving from the back end of waste management to the front end of resource management, better industrial design, and post-consumerism. And here you can see that there are roles to play by engineers and scientists, but also the citizens have a role to play here. In fact, there are many professions will need to be involved in discussing and defining what post-consumerism is. If not consumption, what is it that we need to make our people happy? So we need three things for zero waste. We need industrial responsibility at the front end, we need community responsibility at the back end, and we need good political leadership to bring these two together. And in a moment I'll be talking about 10 steps to zero waste. There is a very precise moment when community responsibility and industrial responsibility come together, face to face, but you'll have to wait for that. So 10 steps to zero waste. Step 1 is source separation. These 10 things make waste. So our 10 steps begin with 10 fingers. These 10 fingers can make waste by mixing everything together, or they can save resources by separation. Step 2 is door-to-door collection systems. In San Francisco, it looks like this. Once a week, you have a container for all the recyclables, a container for all the compostables, the organic fraction, and a container for all the residuals. One truck picks up all the organics, takes it to a composting facility. Another truck picks up these two and takes this to recycling and this to a transfer station. Now in Italy, they've developed more elegant systems, I think, where they have used the same trucks to pick up different materials on different days. So no extra trucks, just different materials on different days. And Spain, especially in Basque country here down near San Sebastian, has copied this method. They call it the Italian method. And you see the different materials being picked up on different days. In this case, organics 3 times a week because of the climate. Now, they've done something very novel in Basque country. They've got a system where each household has a hook, either on a wall or on a post. And that hook has a number on it. And on your containers, your different containers, there's the same number. So you put your containers on that hook. And here's what it looks like. These are the brown containers for the organic fraction. And this is the mayor of Hernani talking to us about this system. Now, here's the, I don't think you can see it, but there's a number here. Oh, there it is, 1870, and here this is 1870. And this system Okay, and also specially designed posts if you don't have a wall. Now, this is proving extremely effective for the organic fraction. The ideal is to take the organics, compost it, and use this compost in agriculture, but you can only do that if you get it clean organics. And look at this is remarkable. You're doing very well if you get over 95% clean organics. Here they're getting 99.76% purity, which is excellent. So this is what the mayor of Anani said. He says, our state-of-the-art technology is the neighbours. If the neighbours separate well, there is no need to build and incinerate. Step 3 is composting. And here's the composting facility in San Francisco. It's surrounded by farmland. And the farm, here you see the farmers readily using this compost. You see it here being applied to fields, vegetables, etc. Here are some of the fruit and vegetables that are produced, and then they go back to San Francisco. So we close the loop. And here, over 200 vineyards, thinking of Argentina, vino tinto, okay. Well, 200 vineyards, and they're using this compost. And notice that they're using the compost in 2 ways. One, to support the growth of the vines, yes, but also to support cover crops which are being grown between the vines. And these cover crops fix the nitrogen, bring in more nutrients to the soil, and also very long roots. So these represent sucking carbon dioxide from the air. And they estimate San Francisco's composted 1.2 million tons of organic waste from their city since 1996. And they estimate that this is the equivalent, they've saved the equivalent of all the CO2 emissions from the traffic going across the Bay Bridge for 3.5 years. And if every city in the United States was to do what San Francisco is doing, then we would reduce global warming by 20% using this technique alone. So composting is probably the simplest, most elegant way of reducing global warming, readily available to every city. Now, in San Francisco, they have a special program where municipal officials educate the kitchen staff to make sure they're putting the right materials into the green container. Very important, because remember, they want to use that organic waste for farming. And they've also, in addition to this educational program, it's 25% cheaper for the containers with the separated organic waste to be picked up compared to the mixed waste. So there's an economic incentive for restaurants and hotels to do this. And I think that's something that Buenos Aires should consider. I had something extraordinary yesterday. And I can understand the reasoning, but the result is absurd. The national government here has said, or is it the national or provincial government, has said that Buenos Aires cannot export any waste from Buenos Aires. You have to look after it yourself. Now, I can understand that. I really can understand that. We don't want you dumping your waste in landfills and incinerators. But if you go to the length of getting clean organic materials from your restaurants and hotels, that should not be treated as if it's waste. That's a resource, and you're getting that resource to where it's needed. So whatever we have to do, hopefully politically, educationally, let's make sure that that law has an exception for clean organic waste. Otherwise, you won't be able to do what San Francisco is doing. Step 4, recycling. Here's the recycling facility in San Francisco. This is what it looks like close up. Here are the separation lines. Another shot of separation line. Now, I should point out that in San Francisco, one company, Recology, has the contract to pick up all the material, the recyclables, the compostables, and the residuals. And they own the recycling and they own the composting, but they don't own the landfill. So there's no incentive for this company to send any material to incinerate, to landfill, because it's their competitor. But they have every incentive to maximize recycling and composting. The other thing is that this company, Recology, is owned by the workers. It's a cooperative. And here you see, not so very different, but smaller scale, but the cartoneros separating here. And this reminds us, I hope this reminds us, that when we talk about zero waste, we're not just talking about recovering materials. We're talking about recovering people. People. Jobs are important. And I was very moved. I went to one of these green centers. I don't think it was this one. But I went to a green center that serves Palermo. See. And I was very moved. First of all, there were 67 people working in this facility. And secondly, the woman who's in charge has been doing this for 23 years. She started picking waste from the street. That's where she started. You know, the lowest of the low. She was telling us that her daughter has just graduated from university, is an agronomist, and her son is studying music at university. Who would have believed 23 years ago that this was possible? But what it means to me is that rather than spending an enormous amount of money on these big incinerators, which destroy things, put a little bit of that money into facilities like this. I think you've got 3 or 4 right now, but you need 18. You need one of these in each of your municipalities, whatever. Yeah, community, in each of your communities, in my view. Okay. So step 5 is reuse and repair centers. Here's one in Berkeley, California, big warehouse. They're recovering furniture, appliances, and materials from deconstruction. Not demolition, deconstruction of old buildings. And here you see it's like a second-hand shopping mall. People buying furniture, clothing, etc. You want a toilet, go to San Francisco. And you want a door. I mean, if people don't realize this, but doors, the value in a door, I mean, you can get doors there which are worth about $5, and at the other end, they're worth a couple of $100, if you know what you're doing. For other people say, doors, oh, you want a door, it's a door. But no, they specialize in doors. This man in particular, this has been running for 30 years. It grosses $3 million a year, 27 well-paid, good benefits. And just to give you an example, some of these employees have been working here for over 20 years. Very stable. It tells you it's a good job. And what I would like to see is consciously getting a career structure for the cartoneros. So you start with the simple separation of paper and plastic, but then you graduate to reuse, repair, and so on. Many more jobs. So here you see a reuse operation in Burlington, Vermont, where they're training people off the streets to repair large appliances, small appliances, electrical goods, and electronic goods. And after 9 months, they have a certificate and they help them to get a job. Here you see deconstruction of an old building, the wood being preserved, used for more building or for making, in this case, furniture. You can see some of the beautiful furniture that's been made out of the wood that's come from old buildings. So these centers can be used for poverty relief, cheaper objects. They can be used for job creation, job training. They can be linked to deconstruction operations. They can be linked to value-added operations, and they can be used for community development. People like going to these things. We need to reinvent the village in the city. So here's the problem. One of the problems is for the officials in charge of Buenos Aires, What do they think of waste? 6,000 tons coming at you every day. Oh, and if we don't do something immediately, we have a crisis. Build a machine. No. So, on the other hand, I look at waste, I go into the garbage can and I see paper, I see cardboard, I see metal, I see glass, I see food scraps. For me, it's simple. It's simple. But between these two is organization. And one of the things I think is absolutely essential is to decentralize the administration of this to the communes, to make smaller units and seed those smaller units with these reuse and repair centers, which can also be valuable educational tools. And use the activists. Use the activists to educate the people. The activists who are going to give you a terrible time if you build incinerators. No, 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 we don't want incinerators. Use that energy, that passione, to get the right things going. We need to work together. Now, having fun. Having fun. This is a reuse operation in Sweden. You go in, there's a band playing. You have clowns for the kids. You go to the toilet, it's an art gallery. That's pretty exciting art gallery. And then my favorite, this dog. This is the famous separating dog. This dog can separate mixed waste into 6 different categories. And I say, if a dog in Sweden can separate into 6 categories, I think you know what I'm going to say, right? And beautiful displays of second-hand, repairing bicycles, etc. Making fashions, making second-hand clothes fashionable, even for young people to wear. Very difficult in Italy. And rock concerts. The entrance fee to this rock concert for the young people was 20 PET bottles. So they're not only having fun, but they're increasing the consciousness of the young people. And here is the very creative park director presenting his T-shirt to the King of Sweden. I'll tell you a story about it. He gives his T-shirt to the King, and he says, by the way, King, you should wear this when you're mowing your lawn in your castle. And he says, and by the way, when you wear that T-shirt, you're working for me, because it has on the back staff. And then the Queen of Sweden is standing back to us, she says, no, Paul, his name's Paul, no, Paul, he's working for me. So I have several videotapes online called On the Road to Zero Waste, and many of them include these reuse operations, and I find them that aspect of this very inspiring. So you can get them from AmericanHealthStudies.org. So how much can we get with these first 5 steps? Here we go, these first 5 steps. And San Francisco, population 850,000, 50% by 2000. That was the state law. Every community in California had to get 50% by 2000. But now they're up to 80%. 80% diversion. This is everything. This is reduction. This is reuse, recycling, repair, every composting. No incineration. 80%. And their goal for 2020 is zero waste or very close. Now, remember what I said about incineration. That only gets 75% reduction. So if you look at Brescia, 75% reduction, they're left with 25% ash. In San Francisco, 80% diversion with low-tech, not high-tech. High-tech, 75%, low-tech, 80%, and 20% residuals. You can't do much with this, but with the residuals, you can keep working on them. So, back in 1985, San Francisco wanted to build an incinerator, but they didn't. I'm sure they didn't regret it. Maybe people in Brescia are regretting building their incinerator. Okay, in Italy, over 200 communities are getting over 70%, and some very quickly. For example, Novara, near Turin, 70% in 18 months. I couldn't believe that. It's incredible. And then Salerno, near Naples, 72% in just 2 years. And Belgium, the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, Flanders, 6 million people, 73%. Very creative. They are doing everything that I've seen discussed by anybody. Everything. Reuse, repair, right? Everything. Including giving people chickens. Chickens to eat up the stuff in the backyard. Chickens. I don't know what you do with a chicken in a high-rise building, but anyway. So now we have to talk about steps 6 through 10 to get closer to zero waste. We've got to deal with the residual, the frazione residual, the residual fraction. We need waste reduction initiatives. In Ireland, they put a 15-cent tax on plastic shopping bags, and to everybody's amazement, in 1 year, the use of those bags went down 92%. In July, all around the world, there will be demonstrations organized by Gaia to get plastic bag bans throughout the world. So keep an eye open in July to see how many communities are demonstrating to get rid of plastic bags. In Italy, some supermarkets allow you to refill your own detergent and shampoo bottles. And this store, my favorite, in Capanari, the first town in Italy to declare zero waste, 60 taps. Taps for detergents, shampoo, water, milk, beer, honey, olive oil, and my favorite, vino. So you go in there, you get a glass. You try that. Oh, and you know where it's produced. It tells you on the map. Well, that's very nice, very good. And then 2, that's very nice. And then 3. My favorite lesson. Whole of it. Maybe Argentina, you can do this for me. And no plastic. If you have your own reusable bag, that's fine. But if not, you can buy one made of jute or cotton, but not plastic. And in the schools, not plastic. Get the plastic out, replace with glass, stainless steel, ceramics. And even the babies are zero waste. Eco Bimbi, reusable panolini, reusable diapers, not disposable diapers. Economic incentives, the pay-by-bag system, the pay-as-you-throw system. So here, the compostables are free, the recyclables are free, but the residuals, the more you make, the more you pay. And there's different ways of administering this. In Seattle, the people could choose the size of the container for the residuals. They could choose a big one, medium-sized one, or a small one. But you pay more for the big one each month than the medium and small. So it's up to you. Very simple, very simple. And some people, this is not politically attractive in some communities. People say, why should I pay any more money? I already pay my money. I pay my money for the waste. Okay. So in this case, what you can do, you can make it save as you throw. So you would have a baseline allowance. So every household is allowed a certain amount of residuals. If you get, and it's weighed, there'll be a chip in the container, weighed. Here come the engineers again, okay? There's a chip in there, and if you get less than the baseline, then you get money back. And that is more politically attractive if you need to do it that way. Okay, in Italy, communities have gone from 70% to 85% reduction with this technique alone. And when Ursabile in Basque Country copied this Italian system with the door-to-door collection, and the pay-by-bag system, 86% in 7 months. So you can be very quick. Okay, first 7 steps. Now we come to step 8, which is the most important for getting close to zero waste. The first 7 we can get 80, maybe more %. But now we're going after that last 20%. And I'm going to deal with this step 8 in 2 parts. 8A, this is a facility to separate the residuals. And they built these in Nova Scotia. They built them in front of the landfill. And no waste can go directly into the landfill. It must go through this facility. So here, outside Halifax in Nova Scotia, is their landfill. Here is the separation facility for the residuals. The trucks come in here. They can't go in directly into the landfill. And here's a close-up. So the trucks come in here. This part of the building is for separation. Here is where the dirty organic fraction goes for composting. Here the composting is cured out here, and there's the landfill in the background. So I'll go through this in more detail. Here's the bags of residuals. These go on to conveyor belts. Here the bags are opened, and the materials go onto the conveyor belt, and these workers are separated. Now notice how well protected they are. They have earplugs, breathing, goggles, helmets, and gloves. They are pulling out more recyclables and more toxics like paint, solvents. But the dirty organic fraction is not touched. Negative separation. It goes all the way to the end of the conveyor belt. And that's here. We're now here. And this thing is shredded. And the shredded material, which is the dirty organics plus a lot of plastic packaging. You see the rails on top of the carrier? This machine runs down those rails and turns the material, aerates it, and shifts it a little bit towards the end. After 21 days, it's gone to the end of the trough. Here it is, cooking. Here's the composting going on. And the composting, the object of this is not to produce a product to sell, but to stabilize it biologically above ground, so when it gets underground, it doesn't produce the odors, the methanol, the methane, or the leachate, or to minimize that. That's the idea. Then this goes to the temporary landfill, the transition landfill. We hope by 2020 this is practically non-existent. But you notice there's something that not there. What do you normally see in landfills that you don't see in that picture? What? Birds. Birds, yeah. Birds. No birds. So, interesting. They're doing a fairly good job. Now, the second part of this facility needs to be the introduction of a zero-waste research center. We need to put a zero-waste research center here to study the currently non-recyclable material. And we need to use local universities and students who are interested in sustainability, industrial design, advertising, all kinds of things that they could be interested in to study our mistakes, our bad design. Okay? So they can not only monitor the whole system to make sure they're maximizing the recycling, etc. They can be learning about all the waste reduction initiatives going on around the world and making sure local businesses are doing that. They can design local uses for materials. Now, it was interesting. When I went to the Green Center, the cartoneros. Upstairs, there's a research operation. There's an engineer, a graduate engineer, who's taking materials which currently are not being recycled by the people, like onion bags, plastic film, and putting the onion bags between two sheets of plastic and then using this material, which is strong, to make bags, handbags, wallets, this kind of thing. This is wonderfully creative. So local uses, and then recommend to industry better industrial design. Each student will be told, so many of these are ending up in our residual stream. What's a better design of these tools? Hundreds of them. And they wrote to Lavasa. They said, look, we're a zero waste community, and we look in our residual fraction, we see all these coffee capsules from you, Lavasa. What can we do about this? And the next day they got a phone call from Lavasa that said, let's meet, let's talk. And they've been talking ever since about what to do with this stuff. So this is where community responsibility and industrial responsibility come together, face to face, this facility. And the message to industry is, if we can't reuse it, if we can't recycle it, if we can't compost it, you shouldn't be making it. We need better industrial design for the 21st century. Designers. This is where some engineers can come. Now, who was the first person in the world to talk about zero waste, do you think? Very famous person. Very famous. First person to talk about zero waste. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, in his writing, says, there's no such thing as waste. Meaning, in those days, that each company, each manufacturer, the waste products of that company could be used by another company to make other products. So, zero waste then is a combination of community responsibility, and in the United States we sum that up with 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. You've got to remember the C, compost. Okay, but we need a 4th R, redesign. And that's industrial responsibility. We need both of these. So if you want a quick way to say, well, what's zero waste? You say reduce, reuse, recycle, and redesign to get to zero waste. Okay. And then better industrial design is step 9. And that's part of industrial responsibility. We have to design for sustainability from the very beginning. We need clean production, stop using lead and cadmium and mercury, and we need extended producer responsibility. In other words, looking to the future, we've got to tell our corporations, if you produce a product or you produce a package, expect to get it back. You put it out, it's going to come back to you. Don't expect the community to keep solving your problems of bad design. So I'll give you an example of good packaging. This should be 60 years. For over 60 years, the beer industry in Ontario has been using refillable glass bottles. 98% of these are recovered. Each bottle goes around 18 times. It saves the company money. There's 2,000 jobs collecting and cleaning these bottles, and it's no cost to the municipality. So when people say, oh, zero waste is utopian, no, it's been going on for 60 years with this company in Ontario. Okay, what about products? The Xerox Corporation in Europe is recovering old copy machines from 21 countries. So the trucks which take the new machines in one direction bring back the old machines in the opposite direction. They take these machines to huge warehouses in the Netherlands, and there they're stripped down. They're recovering 95% of the materials, either as reusable parts or recyclable materials. That's pretty good, but it's even better than that, because this is saving the company $76 million a year. And that is the news that's coming back from every corporation that invests in zero waste. What they're telling us, it's saving us money. Waste is the visible face of inefficiency. So if you make less waste, you're more efficient. If you're more efficient, you save money. They save money on production costs and money on the disposal costs. And as I think we should be using extended producer responsibility, particularly for toxic items. In other words, we will encourage or pass legal laws to say to paint manufacturers and battery manufacturers and so on, you must take your products back. But are they going to organize the collection systems? Or are they going to get other entities to organize the collection? And if they do, then perhaps we can use our reuse and repair centers or our cartoneros in their establishment to collect these things. But you'll have to pay them for it. So it's another way of getting money into the right people. Okay. So step 10 is the backup landfill that we've talked about here. And if you compare incineration with zero waste, looks like this is incineration, you get a toxic landfill. What we're saying is, no, we don't want that. We want steps 1 through 7, then the separation facility, the research facility, and the backup landfill. Which would you prefer, this or this? And of course, you don't stop here because your research operation is continually trying to reduce that residual fraction. So summarizing, here are the 10 steps. And what I like about these 10 steps, it begins with everybody. Remember? Everybody, we all start here. But by the time we get to the end, we're using our brightest minds in society. We're using our professors, our students, our industrial designers. And it's important to get them because door-to-door separation is the springboard to zero waste, but zero waste is the springboard to sustainability, and we want those professors and students to be forming the links with other aspects of sustainability. For example, composting feeds right into sustainable agriculture, etc. The movie. I do watch this movie if you can with Jeremy Irons. He looks at landfills and incinerators around the world. He also looks at the dumping of plastics into the sea, which is heartbreaking. And he ends up in San Francisco. In October, and I may have a Spanish publisher, I have this book out, The Zero Waste Solution, and the subtitle is Untrashing the Planet, One Community at a Time. So we don't expect everybody to do this overnight, but we do expect to see pioneer communities of different sizes, San Francisco, a city of 1 million, small towns, intermediate-sized towns, maybe Buenos Aires. So this plan is better for the economy, more jobs. It's better for our health, less toxics. It's better for us universities, more relevance. It's better for our planet, it's more sustainable, and it's better for our children because it offers more hope. Every day we're telling our children there's no future. Global warming, ozone damage, loss of forests, loss of species, plastics in the ocean, toxics in our babies when they're born. Imagine could you imagine what it's like to be 12, 13, 14 and told there's no future? We've got to give them hope. And this plan is a plan to give people hope, and it involves everybody. Everybody has something to do. Now, going beyond consumerism. This is the biggest challenge for young people. I see lots of young people here. The challenge is reducing material consumption. We need to. We have to. but increasing the quality of life. In other words, changing from the preoccupation of standard of living and focusing on quality of life. And that's what we need our young people to solve that problem. Now, what we need is to swap a life built around acquiring a series of objects, which is the American system. The more you consume, the happier you become. Not true. The more you consume, the fatter you become. And the more waste you produce. So we need a better system. So we need to change to a life built around a series of expanding human relationships. We need community development. In the 1960s, we had this slogan: make love, not war. And I did my best. I did my best in the 60s, in the Vietnam peace movement, to do that. It was fun. But now in the 2000s, we have a war on waste, so we need to update the slogan. Make love, not waste. Okay. But this becomes more difficult, doesn't it? I see some older people, yes, this becomes more difficult. So, here's the t-shirt in Italy: make love, not waste. We need to make friends, not waste. That's the answer to overconsumption. Other people, not objects, other people. And 3 final messages. To citizens, don't let the experts take your common sense away. To politicians, put your faith back in people. Stop running to magic machines. This is the magic. And to activists, activista, have fun. You've got to enjoy this. And I find it very enjoyable. God recycles, the devil burns. In Italiano, Dio ricicla, il diavolo brucia. And we have a little song. We have a little song which I shall sing with you, because this is my last presentation in Buenos Aires. So I will say goodbye, Argentina, with this song. Mine eyes have seen the garbage that's a smouldering on the grate. We must stop incineration before it is too late. Unless we wish the dangers, we had better separate, and we must do it now. Oh, we don't want incineration. We don't want incineration. We don't want incineration. We know there's a better way. In Italiano. No agli inceneritori, no agli inceneritori, no agli inceneritori, esiste un modo migliore. Grazie. Finished. Finished. Finished.